What would you do if the seat you rightfully paid for, the one with your name on it, your boarding pass, your confirmation, was handed to someone else? Not because of an emergency, not because of a system glitch, but because you made the wrong person feel uncomfortable. Now imagine, you're a black woman, a respected doctor, a national figure, and yet they ask you to leave, not her. Would you stay silent? Would you walk away? Or would you make a phone call that brings a billion-dollar airline to its knees? This is the powerful story of Dr. Celeste Harmon, a woman who boarded a plane expecting nothing more than to travel in peace and ended up igniting one of the most transformative reckonings in aviation history. A moment of discrimination, a refusal to back down, a legacy that would reshape everything. Are you ready to witness what really happened in Seat 1A? If this story matters to you, share, and subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss what unfolds next. Now, let's begin. Have you ever been asked to surrender something you rightfully paid for, just to make someone else feel more important? Celeste Harmon had faced her share of disrespect over the years. Quiet, persistent, dignified disrespect, the kind that wears a polished smile and sounds almost polite. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened on Flight 372 from San Diego to Seattle. The morning had started out uneventful. Clear skies, smooth check-in. Her travel assistant, Layla, had already confirmed her seat the night before 1A, first class, window side. It wasn't just about the luxury. Celeste had work to do, notes to revise, a speech to finalize for the MedTech Summit later that day. She arrived at the airport 3 hours early, always did. She liked moving without rush. She called it preserving her calm. The bustle of Elira International Airport buzzed around her like a living organism. Loud, but somehow still rhythmic. She wore a charcoal gray blazer, pressed cream trousers, and a navy silk scarf looped loosely around her neck, a combination that felt both deliberate and effortless. People stared sometimes. That happened when your face had appeared in Forbes or Science Today. When you were one of the few black women to lead a biotech firm and actually make it profitable not once, but 3 times. Still, she never expected special treatment, just fair treatment. She walked toward Gate B12 with coffee in one hand, boarding pass in the other, earbuds in place but no music playing. A small trick to avoid unnecessary small talk. The boarding area was filling up slowly. She glanced up at the monitor. Orion Air Flight 372 to Seattle on time. Good. Celeste had flown with Orion Air for years. She was Diamond Elite, their highest-tier loyalty member. She'd never had an issue before. Their staff was usually efficient, if not overly warm. She took a seat a few rows away from the boarding line and glanced over her notes. Her panel today was titled Gene Access Equity in Future Medicine. It mattered. All of it. The summit, the investors, the students who would be watching from across the country. Representation always mattered. "Excuse me, ma'am?" She blinked and looked up. A man in a crisp Orion Air uniform stood beside her. His name tag read Kyle. Dr. Harmon. Right. His tone was friendly, but his eyes were scanning her bag, her seat, her phone. She nodded. "Yes. Is something wrong?" He gave a half smile, the kind you give before delivering bad news. "There's been a minor error with your seating assignment. If you could come with me to the counter, we just need a quick minute to sort it out." Celeste narrowed her eyes slightly. She felt it. That subtle ripple in her gut, the one that usually meant this isn't just a mix-up. She stood anyway, calmly. Sure. Let's see what the issue is. As they walked toward the gate counter, she noticed two things. First, a woman in large designer sunglasses was already standing by the boarding lane chatting with another agent, laughing like she owned the space. A bright white coat, expensive leather tote, platinum blonde bob. Second, Kyle was no longer smiling. "Here we are," he said, motioning toward the screen as if she were meant to be impressed by the flight roster. It appears that seat 1A was reassigned. Celeste raised an eyebrow. "Reassigned, I booked that seat. I have the confirmation right here. It's been on my itinerary for a week." Kyle nodded too quickly. Yes, and we see that. Totally understandable. But a late change came through. A special accommodation request. He tapped the keyboard, avoiding her eyes. Celeste's voice dropped slightly, firm, controlled. What kind of special request overrides a Diamond Elite reservation with verified confirmation? There was a pause, a longer one than necessary. Kyle glanced over his shoulder at the woman in the white coat who was now being handed a boarding pass with a smile. Celeste followed his gaze, and for a moment, it clicked. The woman turned just enough for Celeste to recognize her. Sloane Winslow, socialite, real estate heiress, daughter of the Winslow Group CEO and frequent fixture at charity galas and overpriced silent auctions. She was also someone who had once, very publicly, referred to Celeste as too militant for a scientist during a panel discussion on healthcare equity. Celeste inhaled slowly. The edges of her patience began to fray, but she steadied her breath. "So, just to be clear," she said quietly, "you're telling me my seat, which I paid for, which I confirmed, as a loyalty member, is being taken by someone who just walked in." Kyle shifted his weight from foot to foot. "I assure you, ma'am, you'll still have a premium experience. We've arranged for a seat in business class, row 3A. Very comfortable. We'll even include a voucher." There it was, the downgrade hidden in politeness. The assumption that a voucher could make humiliation feel less insulting. Celeste stared at him for a moment. "No," she said simply. Kyle blinked. "I'm sorry, no," she repeated. "I'm not giving up my seat." The silence between them was immediate and loud. Passengers around the counter glanced over. The blonde woman tilted her head with interest, then slipped through the boarding gate without another word. Celeste felt the heat rise in her throat, and yet her voice remained steady. "I booked 1A. I intend to sit in 1A." Kyle looked toward another staff member. Celeste looked toward the gate, and in that frozen, silent moment, something fundamental began to shift. Celeste Harmon didn't rise to success by accident. She earned every inch of it in silence, in shadows, and in rooms where people didn't always want her to belong. The moment at the gate, that sting of being reassigned, wasn't new. Not really. It was just bigger this time, louder, and more brazen. But to understand how much it hurt, how much it insulted something deeper, you'd have to understand who she was. She was born in East Oakland, in a neighborhood the city quietly tried to forget. Her mother, Denise, was a nurse, a fierce one. She raised Celeste and her younger brother alone after their father left when Celeste was 8. The apartment was small, the windows drafty in winter, and sometimes dinner was ramen and leftover cafeteria fruit cups. But the house never lacked for books. Stacks of second-hand encyclopedias, dog-eared copies of Scientific American, a worn-out anatomy textbook her mom kept from nursing school. At 8 years old, Celeste could already name every bone in the human body. School came easily, but belonging did not. In 4th grade, a teacher told her she was a little intense for a girl. In 7th, she was accused of cheating on a math test because her answers were too precise. By high school, she had learned to hide her brilliance beneath politeness. Smile just enough. Don't raise your voice. Be the kind of smart that doesn't scare people. But at night, in the quiet, she would spread out her notebooks and scribble formulas, diagrams, ideas for wearable tech that could detect infections through sweat. Her heroes weren't celebrities. They were scientists, Dr. Patricia Bath, Mae Jemison, Katherine Johnson. She earned a full ride to Stanford, majored in biomedical engineering, interned at MIT, then Johns Hopkins, then with a research team building low-cost diagnostic kits for rural hospitals. She graduated top of her class. Her thesis, Genomic Access and the Ethics of Algorithmic Medicine, later published in Nature Medicine. By 30, she had founded Harmonix Biolab, a biotech startup focused on democratizing gene therapy. By 34, she had negotiated global partnerships in 5 countries, secured a patent for a self-adaptive RNA processor, and become the youngest black woman to ever keynote the International Medical Tech Congress. And yet, not a week went by without someone mistaking her for a flight attendant, a nurse, or worse, assuming she was someone's assistant instead of the CEO. She never corrected people angrily, but she always corrected them, because dignity wasn't a demand. It was a boundary. Now, at 39, she was headed to Seattle for the MedTech Equity Summit, where she was delivering the closing keynote on bridging the biomedical divide, a talk she had spent weeks crafting, and Seat 1A on Flight 372 wasn't just a seat. It was where she planned to review her slides, rehearse her closing lines, and prepare for what could become the defining moment of her public career. She had also been scheduled to meet afterward with Dr. Kavita Shah, a potential investor who ran a global health innovation fund. They were expected to discuss a major grant proposal for underserved communities in Detroit. This wasn't just a trip. It was a moment that could open access to thousands of patients who had long been denied. So when Kyle Young, unsteady, maybe even well-meaning, told her that someone else had taken her seat, it felt less like a mistake and more like a message. You can do everything right. You can still be told to step aside. As she stood at the gate, tension tightening in her jaw, she briefly considered giving in. It was just a seat, a 2-hour flight. She could review her talk in row 3, maybe even finish editing in the airport lounge in Seattle. But then she remembered something her mother once said. The moment you teach people you're easy to ignore, they'll do it forever. And another voice joined in her own. I earned that seat. She had spent her life preparing for these rooms, these opportunities, these rare invitations to speak truth in spaces that too often chose comfort over justice. And now, here she was, reduced to a boarding pass negotiation, over a chair she had already paid for. She hadn't planned to make a scene. She never did. But when injustice knocks loudly enough, sometimes silence is more dangerous than disruption. She looked back at Kyle and said, once again, evenly, I'm not giving up 1A. He hesitated, glanced nervously toward his colleague. Passengers were now watching. Sloane Winslow, the white woman now comfortably boarding through the first-class tunnel, tossed a glance over her shoulder, smirked slightly, and vanished down the jet bridge. Celeste felt something shift inside her. Not rage, not even embarrassment, just resolve. If they wanted to turn this flight into a problem, so be it, but she wasn't going to make it easy. The Orion Elite Sky Lounge was meant to be an oasis, a quiet reprieve from the chaos of terminals, all sleek marble counters, soft jazz, curated tea assortments, and staff trained to say of course instead of okay. Celeste had been there before, many times. It was part of her travel routine: fly often enough, fly well enough, and the lounge became your second office. She'd taken calls there, held investor debriefs, once even reviewed an entire grant proposal during a 5-hour delay. Today, though, something felt different. She couldn't name it at first. A subtle tightness in the air, the way eyes glanced, then quickly looked away, the faint rustle of uniforms moving a little too fast near the front desk. Celeste checked in at the front. The staff member, a woman with a sharp bun and sharp eyes, barely looked up from her screen. "Name?" she asked flatly. "Dr. Celeste Harmon," she said, showing her app and ID in one motion. A beat. The woman glanced at the screen, nodded, tapped her keyboard. "Diamond Elite," she muttered, as if she'd hoped for a different result. "You're cleared." No welcome, no smile, just the tap of a plastic card and the slide of a door. Celeste walked in, chest tightening slightly. She was used to indifference, but this was something else. The lounge was half full. Businessmen on phones. A young couple whispering over coffee. A few tech startup types buried in laptops. Celeste found a quiet seat by the window and plugged in her charger. She opened her laptop, but didn't start typing yet. Something tugged at her attention. At the desk, the same woman who had checked her in was now whispering with two other employees, a tall man with slicked back hair, name tag Luis, and a younger blonde woman named Kendra. Their voices were hushed, but their glances weren't subtle. They kept looking in her direction. Each time Celeste met their eyes, they looked away. Her stomach tightened just slightly. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Black women with high status learn early to spot the shift. The way conversation dulls when you enter a room. The way smiles thin. The way your presence becomes a question mark in places where you've already paid for the answer. She turned back to her screen, typed a few lines of notes, sipped her tea, then heard it. "Isn't that the woman from that Forbes profile?" Kendra whispered. Luis chuckled. "Yeah, but didn't she have some lawsuit drama? Or was it that vaccine study thing?" Celeste didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the screen, but her jaw locked. There had been no lawsuit, no drama, only a deliberate misreading of her research by a blogger with a grudge corrected publicly by multiple journals. Still, the rumor lingered in online corners. Always did, especially for black women who dared to lead in medicine. Across the lounge, she noticed someone watching her, an older white man in a navy vest, reading a newspaper. He nodded politely. She nodded back, a moment of quiet mutuality. Then, her phone buzzed. Layla, her assistant, had texted, "FYI VP from Avalon Capital might be on your flight. Row 1C. Opportunity," Celeste replied. "Good to know. Keep me posted." At the desk. Kendra pulled Luis aside, said something quickly. He nodded, picked up a phone. A minute later, he hung up and whispered again. The glances continued. Celeste's heart was now beating slightly faster, but her face didn't show it. She had sat on panels about bias in hiring, taught medical ethics seminars on systemic erasure. But right now, she was just a woman trying to fly to Seattle, trying to sit in the seat she'd paid for, trying not to be made small. She stood up, walked to the refreshment table, and poured herself a cup of hibiscus tea. As she turned, she saw Sloane Winslow enter the lounge, sunglasses on, loud designer heels, no luggage, just attitude. The staff, the same ones who had greeted Celeste with silence, now smiled broadly. "Ms." Winslow Kendra chirped. Louise nearly jogged forward to greet her. Sloane didn't even say thank you, just waved a manicured hand and whispered, "Need my usual. Window, if possible, and no riffraff nearby. You know how I get." Celeste took a sip of tea. The bitter warmth hit her tongue like static. Riff-raff. She knew who that was meant for. A few minutes later, as Sloane settled into the seat directly across from Celeste without acknowledging her, Kendra approached quietly. Her smile, tight-lipped, not warm. "Dr. Harmon," she said. "There's a minor seating concern we'd like to resolve with you before boarding." "Could you please come to the front?" Celeste blinked. Slow, measured, concerned, she asked. Kendra didn't elaborate. "It'll just take a moment." Celeste looked at her cup, then back at Kendra. She stood. She already knew what was coming. Your seat was reassigned. The words floated in the air like smoke, not thick, but hard to breathe through. Celeste stared at Luis, the tall, impeccably groomed Orion Gate agent who had clearly practiced this line before. She stood calmly at the gate desk, shoulders squared, breath steady. Behind her, the buzz of boarding announcements echoed across the terminal. Row numbers, priority lanes, the usual ballet of travel. But here, it was different. Luis didn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said again. There was a last-minute reconfiguration, and Seat 1A has now been assigned to another Diamond Elite member who had a special request. You'll be moved to 3A in business class. Still a premium seat. Still a premium seat. Still, like that word was supposed to make her feel better. Celeste folded her hands calmly. Her voice came out soft, almost gentle. "I selected 1A 2 weeks ago. I confirmed it yesterday. I have the email, and I'm also Diamond Elite." Luis hesitated, then tapped his keyboard like it might do the talking for him. "Yes, we see that. But sometimes adjustments have to be made for passengers with special status. Ms. Winslow booked late and needed a quieter location." Celeste blinked. Once, quieter. He nodded too quickly. "She's sensitive to certain distractions." Distractions. There it was. Celeste's chest rose slightly. She tilted her head. "Is this official policy that a woman with documented status and a reserved seat can be bumped last minute because someone else feels like they need it more?" A second agent, Kendra, from the lounge stepped forward with a new boarding pass in her hand. "We understand your frustration, Dr. Harmon, but please understand, we're trying to accommodate everyone the best we can." The boarding pass practically glowed in her fingers. "Seat 3A. "I see," Celeste said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Because now, people were listening. The couple behind her in line had stopped chatting. The businessman scrolling through emails had paused mid-swipe. Even the flight attendant standing near the bridge entrance was watching. Lips pursed. Celeste held Kendra's gaze. "I paid for that seat. I confirmed that seat. I planned around that seat, and now you're telling me it's been handed over to someone who simply asked for it." Kendra's face flushed. She didn't answer. Louise stepped in again. Voice clipped. "We're not trying to make this difficult. Dr. Harmon, we need you to accept the new assignment so we can begin boarding." That word again. Need. As if it was her responsibility to make their mistake more convenient. As if the problem was her resistance, not their audacity. Celeste breathed in deeply, then exhaled. "No," she said. Louise blinked. "Excuse me." "No," she repeated. "I'm not accepting a downgrade because someone else decided they were more important." A few heads turned. There was a tension now, not the explosive kind, but the slow burn kind. The kind that makes people look over their shoulders, whisper, film. Celeste didn't care. She had earned that seat. She had shown up on time, paid the premium, followed every rule, and yet here she was, once again, being told her presence was inconvenient. "I want to speak with the supervisor," she said quietly. Kendra glanced at her watch. "The supervisor is currently unavailable, and we are on a tight departure schedule." Then perhaps you should have thought of that before reassigning confirmed seats. Behind them, another passenger, a young woman in headphones, stepped out of line and leaned toward Celeste. "I saw you in Forbes," she whispered. "You're not wrong. This is messed up." Celeste gave her a grateful nod but didn't lose focus. Louise tapped the keyboard again. Fast. Frustrated, Kendra sighed. "We can offer you a lounge voucher, a future flight credit, but the decision has been made. Seat 1A is unavailable." Unspoken words hovered in the air. "Take the deal. Don't make a scene. Be grateful you're still flying first class at all." Celeste thought of every black woman who had been told to shrink themselves in public, to be the bigger person, to just let it go. But she also thought of her mother. Don't teach people to ignore you. And, more than anything, she thought of the young woman watching from behind her phone, recording, quietly. Someone was paying attention. Someone always was. "I'm not moving," she said simply. Luis's mouth tightened. He looked at Kendra. Kendra looked at the boarding bridge. "We need to begin boarding," she said again. Then, as if trying to pass the problem along, she handed the boarding pass to a flight attendant now walking over Sherry. Her name tag read, "Dr. Harmon." "Right," Sherry said politely, stepping in. "I'll personally escort you to your new seat." Celeste remained still. "I'll go to my original seat," she said. Sherry hesitated. Eyes flicked to Kendra, then back, a pause, then a warning. "If we can't get boarding started, we may need to rebook you on a later flight." It wasn't a threat. It was a bluff wrapped in protocol, but it landed like a slap. Celeste narrowed her eyes, not angry, but steady. "That won't be necessary. I'll take my seat now." And she stepped past the desk, toward the jet bridge, toward seat 1A, and toward a fight that hadn't even begun. The inside of the plane felt colder than usual, not physically, but in tone, in energy. Celeste stepped through the jet bridge and onto the aircraft, flanked silently by Sherry, the flight attendant. There was no warmth in the welcome, no smile, just that tight, professional tone people used when they wanted a problem to quietly go away. First class was only half boarded. Still, Celeste felt the eyes. The businessman in 1C glanced up from his laptop. A young woman in 2A sipped champagne and looked away. Celeste walked toward her seat 1A and stopped. Someone was already in it. The woman had a posture of belonging. Leg crossed, coat draped over the seat next to her, designer purse occupying the empty space like it paid rent. She wore large black sunglasses, indoors, and scrolled casually on her phone. No hesitation, no guilt. Celeste stared for a moment, then cleared her throat. "Excuse me," she said gently. "That's my seat." The woman didn't look up, didn't blink, didn't move. Sherry leaned in. "Miss Winslow." The woman turned slowly, finally acknowledging the disruption. "Oh, this again," she said, lips curling. "I already told the desk. I'm settled. I prefer the window. It's more comfortable for me." She didn't say hello. She didn't ask, "Who are you?" Just, "I'm settled." Celeste remained composed. "I have a boarding pass for 1A. You're in my seat." Sloane Winslow, because it was her, of course, pulled out her own pass like it was a prop in a game. "It says 1C, she admitted, waving it like a napkin. "But I like this one better. The light's too harsh over there." Then she turned to Sherry, voice sugary and fake. "You don't mind, do you?" She seems flexible. Celeste blinked. The words were polite, but the tone was acid. Sherry looked trapped. Her eyes darted between the two women, searching for an easy way out. "Miss Winslow, I'm afraid 1A was assigned to—" "I know what it says," Sloane snapped, cutting her off, "but I'm already here. My bags are here. My drink is here. Are we really going to make a scene over, what, 4 feet?" She laughed, loud, performed. It wasn't about the seat. It was about power. Celeste inhaled through her nose. This wasn't new. This wasn't unfamiliar. But still, it burned. Her voice remained steady. "I booked this seat. I paid for this seat. I'm asking you respectfully to move to the seat assigned to you." Sloane leaned back, crossed her arms, and smiled without smiling. "I don't take orders from people like you." That line hit like a slap in a cathedral. "People like you." She didn't say it directly, but she didn't have to. The man in 1C looked up. The young woman in 2A froze with her glass halfway to her lips. Across the aisle, another passenger, a middle-aged black man in a blazer, slowly shook his head. Celeste stood motionless. 1,000 replies rushed into her throat. But she picked only one. Quiet, sharp, precise. "You don't have to take orders from me, but you do have to follow the rules." Sherry stepped in again, her tone more urgent now. "Miss Winslow, please, this is a full flight. We need everyone in their assigned seats." Sloane rolled her eyes. "This is ridiculous. Fine. But if I spill my coffee during takeoff, I'm not responsible." She gathered her things in slow, exaggerated motions like she was doing the world a favor. Celeste didn't speak, didn't gloat. She simply waited. As Sloane finally dragged herself into 1C with an offended sigh, Celeste stepped into 1A. She set her bag under the seat, tucked her coat, fastened her belt, and breathed. For a brief moment, silence returned, but not for long. Sloane, still within earshot, muttered just loudly enough, "Some people just have to make everything difficult." Celeste turned, met her gaze full on, and said softly, "Some people just refuse to be erased." The cabin door hadn't even closed, and yet the seat still didn't feel safe. Celeste stared straight ahead, trying to drown out Sloane Winslow's not-so-subtle huffs beside her. The woman was shifting loudly in her seat, flipping through a fashion magazine with the kind of exaggerated page turns designed to make a point. Celeste ignored her. She looked out the window, letting her breath settle. She had won the seat, but somehow she hadn't won. A few minutes later, a different flight attendant approached. Younger, nervous, name tag Cassie, Dr. Harmon, she said quietly, crouching slightly. Could I ask you to step into the front galley for just a moment? It's about your seat. Celeste turned, confused. What about my seat? Cassie gave a polite, tight-lipped smile, the one trained to look like kindness. I just want to clarify a few things. It won't take long. The passengers in row 2 were watching again. Celeste felt their eyes. She also felt something else. Heavier, familiar, the old equation. Black woman plus assertiveness, us problem. Still, she unbuckled her seatbelt, rose slowly, and followed Cassie through the curtain and into the tight galley between the cockpit and the front row seats. Cassie closed the curtain behind them. Inside stood another figure, the lead flight attendant. A woman in her late 50s, with a no-nonsense bun and a name tag that read Greta. She looked Celeste up and down, not unkindly, but with a guardedness that said, let's keep this quiet. Dr. Harmon, she began. We're hoping to avoid any further disruptions. Celeste folded her arms. The only disruption so far has been someone sitting in my seat. Greta nodded. Slowly. Understood. But Miss Winslow has just informed us that she feels uncomfortable, that she felt threatened by the exchange earlier. Celeste stared at her. The sentence replayed in her mind. She felt threatened. For a moment, Celeste forgot how to breathe. I asked her to move from a seat she wasn't assigned. That's it. I believe you, Greta said quickly, but if a passenger says they feel unsafe, we're required to respond. Celeste's voice dropped, calm, steel. And do you require evidence when people feel unsafe? Greta looked uneasy. That's not how our process works. Cassie shifted beside her, awkward, like she wanted to melt into the beverage cart. Celeste spoke again, slower this time. You're pulling me aside, not her. You're treating me like the threat, all because I asked for what I was legally entitled to. Greta raised her hands. I'm just trying to keep the cabin calm. Things escalate quickly at 30,000 feet. I'd like to reseat you further back in business class, just to avoid further discomfort for everyone. Everyone. That word stung. It always meant someone else's comfort mattered more than hers. So, I'm being moved, Celeste said flatly. Again. Greta hesitated. If you refuse to cooperate, she said carefully, we may need to notify the captain and remove you from the flight entirely. The words didn't explode. They chilled. They settled in the air like frost on a window. Celeste looked at Cassie. Cassie looked away. And Celeste felt it, that sinking sensation of being outnumbered in a space you paid to belong in. A space that would always, somehow, belong to someone else first. She turned to Greta and asked, softly, do you know what it feels like to fight for a seat, just to be told you're too difficult to keep it? Greta didn't answer. Celeste shook her head, tears threatening behind her eyes but never falling. I'm not going to make this easier for you by disappearing. So, if you're going to remove me, do it, loudly, in front of everyone. Let them see how you treat your loyal customers. Greta's mouth opened, then closed again. Cassie finally whispered, sorry. Celeste straightened her blazer and walked back through the curtain, past the watching eyes, back to seat 1A. She didn't sit. She stood beside the seat, facing the cabin. Sloane looked up, smirked, then looked away. But for the first time, She looked nervous. The quiet didn't last. Just as Celeste began to lower herself back into seat 1A, the curtain swished open again. Luis, the gate agent from earlier, stepped into the cabin, followed closely by Greta, the lead flight attendant. Their faces were tight, determined. Sherry, standing near the galley, looked frozen. Lewis spoke first. "Dr. Harmon, we've discussed this with the flight crew and we'll need to ask you to deplane." There was no warning in his tone, no kindness in the phrasing, no apology, just protocol sharp and cold as steel. Celeste sat back upright. On what grounds, Luis exhaled through his nose. "Already annoyed. We're not trying to escalate this, but your refusal to cooperate has created a delay, and we cannot have disruptions in first class." Disruptions. Greta spoke next, voice flatter than before. "You're being rebooked on the next available flight. Dr. Harmon, this isn't personal." The words washed over her like sleet. Not personal. Not personal to who? Certainly not to her. All around, passengers were watching. Phones were out now, filming, recording, cataloging. Sloane Winslow sat smugly in 1C, silently victorious. Celeste's hands were shaking not from fear, but restraint. She looked up at Luis. "You're removing me for asking someone to follow seat assignments." Luis didn't respond. Cassie, peeking from behind the curtain, looked like she might cry. It felt surreal, as if the world had tilted just enough to knock reason out of reach. Celeste stood, her voice steady but inside. Something cracked. "This is wrong," she said quietly. Luis gestured toward the exit. "I'm asking you to leave. Please collect your belongings." She gathered her laptop bag, coat, and dignity still intact, though bruised. As she turned down the aisle, a ripple moved through the cabin. Someone whispered, "Unbelievable." Another voice, a woman, said, "I saw the whole thing. She didn't do anything." Celeste kept walking, one foot in front of the other, her face calm, but inside, it burned. She reached the jet bridge and paused, turned, looked one last time at the cabin, at 1A now empty, at Sloane now stretching her legs like a queen on a throne, at Louis' arms folded, victorious in his authority, and at the watching passengers, some ashamed, some confused, some recording everything. Then she stepped into the jet bridge, out of the plane, out of her seat, out of her voice, but not out of the fight. The gate area outside buzzed with casual airport chaos, but to Celeste, it was silent, deafeningly silent. She found a chair by the wall and sat slowly, setting her bag beside her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She did what she always did when the world tried to erase her. She planned. She took out her phone and dialed Layla. Her assistant answered on the first ring. "Celeste." "I was removed," Celeste said flatly. There was a long pause. "What?" "They took my seat, then kicked me off the flight. Layla was already typing. I'll get you another one, anything that gets you to Seattle before 4. Celeste exhaled. Her voice was quieter now. "Raw, book it, and Layla. Yes, get ready. I'm going to make a call." She didn't say who. She didn't need to. Dr. Celeste Harmon sat in silence, not the kind that comes from peace, the kind that follows injustice, sharp, metallic, humming beneath the surface. She stared down at her phone, thumb hovering over her contacts. One name, one number, Marianne Drake, senior counsel for the Department of Aviation Ethics and Oversight. They'd met years ago at a conference on racial disparities in healthcare access. Celeste had spoken. Marianne had approached her afterward. They'd shared stories, stayed in touch, even supported the same STEM nonprofit. Celeste never thought she'd need her this way. But now, she didn't hesitate. The phone rang once, twice. Marianne Drake. Celeste's voice came out calm, controlled. "Hi, Marianne. It's Celeste Harmon." A brief pause, then a warm reply. "Celeste, it's been a while. Is everything okay?" Celeste looked out the terminal window, watching a plane push back onto the runway. "No," she said, "it's not." She told the story, every detail, from the Orion Air VIP lounge to the seat reassignment, to Sloan Winslow's entitlement, to the moment she was escorted off the flight like a security threat. She didn't cry. She didn't dramatize. She simply stated facts and trusted the facts to speak for themselves. By the end, Marianne's tone had shifted from friendly to grave. "They removed you from the aircraft after giving your seat to a white passenger with lower status and claimed you were the disruption." Celeste nodded, though Marianne couldn't see it. "Yes." Marianne's voice sharpened. "That's a violation. Possibly several. The DOT requires strict non-discrimination policies in ticket enforcement, especially involving premium seats. Do you have documentation?" Celeste opened her email drafts. "Boarding pass, lounge confirmation, ticket receipt." "Yes. I also have witnesses. Send it all to me." Marianne said, "Now," and Marianne, "Yes." "There's phone footage. Passengers filmed it." Marianne didn't respond at first. Then, "Good." Celeste ended the call and immediately forwarded the files. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't emptiness. It was purpose. Her phone buzzed again. "Layla, you're on the 1240 to Seattle, gate 38B, first class. No complications, I promise." "Thank you," Celeste replied. But Layla wasn't done. "I also posted a short statement. Just said you were removed from a flight despite holding a confirmed premium ticket. I didn't name the airline, but people are reacting." Celeste's stomach tensed. Public exposure wasn't her first instinct. She hated spectacle. But this wasn't spectacle. This was truth. A new text came in unknown number. It read, "Hi. I was in row 2 on your flight. I filmed part of what happened. Happy to share it if it helps." Celeste replied instantly, "Yes, please, thank you." A minute later, the video file arrived. She watched it with headphones. The image wobbled slightly, but was clear. Her voice composed. Patient, asking for her assigned seat. Sloane's smug, dismissive. The crew's hesitant, deflective. And, finally, Luis, escorting her off the plane. It was all there. Celeste sat back in her chair. People around her bustled with suitcases and coffee cups, but she didn't move. She closed her eyes for a moment and let the weight of it all settle. Then she stood, gathered her things, and walked toward gate 38B head high. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. This wasn't over. Inside the Orion Air headquarters, the air was thick, not with smoke, with fear. Phones rang more often, email chains lengthened. The phrase, "We need to talk about Flight 408" echoed through cubicles like a prayer no one wanted to answer. Because people were watching now. It began quietly, a single clip shared from a witness in row 2. Just under a minute, but enough. Enough to show Celeste Harmon, calm, composed, asking for her assigned seat, enough to catch Sloane Winslow, seated with smugness, refusing to move, enough to show the flight crew, doing nothing, and then removing the black woman. That's all it took. By late afternoon, the video had 84,000 views on Twitter. By the next morning, it was on the front page of Reddit's r/Public Freakout. Comment sections lit up. Why is she being punished for asking for the seat she paid for? This is racial bias, plain and simple. I fly Orion every month. Not anymore. And the worst part, Celeste still hadn't spoken publicly. The silence made the story even louder. In the 12th floor office of Jonathan Reed, Orion's VP of Corporate Affairs, an emergency meeting was called, executives filed in, jaws tight, coffees half drunk. At the head of the room sat CEO Malcolm Fry, a man known for poise under pressure, but even he looked grim. "Let's get to the point," Malcolm said. "What happened?" Derek Liu, the director of customer relations, pulled up a screen. The footage, no edits, no music, just reality. They all watched. The moment Luis handed over a boarding pass for a lesser seat. The moment Greta summoned Celeste to the galley. The moment she was escorted off. No raised voices, no threats, only quiet dignity met with bureaucratic betrayal. When the video ended, no one spoke. Until Malcolm broke the silence. "That's a diamond-tier passenger." Heads nodded. An established public figure, someone else added, "And we removed her for asking to sit in a seat she paid for." No one answered, because they all knew the truth. Malcolm stood. His voice wasn't loud, but it landed like a gavel. "I want the names of every staff member involved, gate, lounge, flight crew, anyone who interacted with Dr. Harmon." Derek replied quietly. "We already have them, Luis, Greta, Cassie, and a few others." The lounge team includes Bianca and Joel. They confirmed the reassignment, and the woman who took her seat, Sloane Winslow, claims to be a friend of the CFO's wife. "We haven't verified," Malcolm scoffed. "So we tossed protocol because someone dropped a name." He turned to the HR director. "Start interviews immediately. I want transcripts by end of day, and until we're done," he paused, "suspend everyone involved." Someone at the table looked up. "That'll leak. Let it." Malcolm leaned forward, both palms flat on the table. "This isn't just bad optics. This is moral failure. I don't care what policies they thought they were following. We don't reward silence in the face of prejudice." He looked each executive in the eye. "And we do not eject paying passengers because someone else feels uncomfortable. Not here. Not on my watch." Across the city, Celeste was already on her second flight. First class again, this time greeted with care, a hot towel, a real smile, no drama, no cameras, just quiet. But even as she reclined her seat and gazed at the clouds beyond the window, her thoughts remained elsewhere. What happens when the story breaks? Would people believe her? Would the airline hide? Would Sloane Winslow face consequences? Her phone buzzed again. It was Marianne Drake. "FYI, someone from Orion just contacted DOT to request their own internal review. Looks like your call moved something." Celeste smiled faintly. Just the beginning. The press email came first, then the phone calls. By the end of the day, Celeste Harmon had 5 media requests, 2 podcast invitations, and an offer from a national morning show. She ignored them all, not because she wasn't ready, but because she hadn't decided how she wanted to speak and what her voice should sound like, Not rage, not tears, something quieter, something firmer. She sat in the hotel room in Seattle, wrapped in a cotton robe, staring out at the gray skyline. Her tablet rested on the table beside her untouched. Her phone buzzed every few minutes. She didn't move. She thought. Then she opened her laptop and began to write. She didn't write a thread. She didn't write a rant. She wrote a letter, a public one, not to Orion Air, to the people who watched, to the people who felt the same thing she had erased. My name is Dr. Celeste Harmon. I am a woman, a scientist, a daughter, and a paying customer. On Friday, I was removed from my assigned seat on Orion Air Flight 408, a seat I purchased well in advance so that another passenger, a white woman, could remain seated where she preferred. I was told that honoring my reservation would make others uncomfortable, that my presence created disruption. I was told to cooperate, but what no one seemed to consider was that I was already cooperating by staying calm, by speaking respectfully, by trusting the system. And the system failed me. She paused, stared at the blinking cursor, then continued. This is not an isolated incident. It is the tip of something deeper. A culture where black women are expected to endure indignity quietly so others can stay comfortable. Where our assertiveness is labeled aggression, and our presence is treated as a problem to relocate. I was removed from my seat, but I will not be removed from the conversation. I stand not only for myself, but for every traveler who's ever been told, with a smile, that they don't belong. She read it twice, then posted it. No hashtags, no tag to the airline, just truth. Within minutes, it spread. The post was shared 3,000 times in under an hour. By noon, the clip from the plane resurfaced alongside it. This time, with context, this is who they removed, read her statement, then watched the video. It's not just about a seat. At Orion Air, the damage control team gathered again, this time with urgency. CEO Malcolm Fry had already suspended 5 employees, but now the public knew why. A junior comms officer peeked into the boardroom, pale. "Sir," she said to Malcolm, holding a tablet, "Dr. Harmon just released a statement. It's powerful." Malcolm read it twice. He didn't speak. He simply said, "Schedule a press conference tonight." That evening, Celeste sat across from Marianne Drake at a quiet cafe near her hotel. No reporters, no entourage, just 2 women who understood that battles didn't always need to be loud, but they did need to be precise. "You did the right thing," Marianne said, setting down her cup. Celeste exhaled, her voice softer than usual. "I was scared," she admitted, "that it would be twisted, that I'd be labeled difficult." Marianne nodded. "They'll still try, but the tide's turning." Celeste looked out the window, where the city light shimmered. "Let them try," she said quietly. "I'm not the one who's scared anymore." The press conference was polished. Of course it was. Every backdrop, every word, every pause rehearsed. The CEO of Orion Air, Malcolm Fry, stood behind a podium, his expression solemn, his voice carefully measured. "We failed. We failed a loyal passenger. We failed to uphold the principles we claim to stand for." He looked into the cameras. Dr. Celeste Harmon was removed from Flight 408 under circumstances that never should have occurred. Let me be clear, this was not a matter of policy. It was a matter of human judgment, and the judgment was deeply flawed. The video played behind him, muted, but recognizable. Her calm, their silence, the exit. Malcolm continued. We have launched a full internal audit of all frontline policies, reassignment procedures, and unconscious bias training. The employees involved have been removed from their roles indefinitely pending further review, and we will be reaching out to Dr. Harmon directly to begin amends. He paused, not just with words, with action. The next day, Celeste sat at a small table in the corner of a sunlit co-working lounge in downtown Seattle. She didn't feel victorious. She felt steady. Layla, seated across from her, held a tablet with the live stream playing on silent. "They're trying," she said. Celeste nodded. But trying isn't enough. That afternoon, she got the call. Dr. Harmon, said Malcolm Fry on the other end of the line. "Thank you for taking this." His voice was calm, measured, but tired. Celeste said nothing at first. She wanted him to feel the silence. Then she spoke. "Mr. Fry, I don't need an apology. I need a commitment." He listened, and she laid it out. Not just policy reviews, not just PR spin, reform, real reform. Create a passenger advocacy board. Include flyers from all backgrounds, especially Black women, Indigenous elders, disabled veterans, trans folks, people who are often overlooked in VIP conversations. Host quarterly audits, transparent ones. Publish your training standards. Retrain every customer-facing employee. Create escalation alternatives that don't remove the person being mistreated just to keep the flight on time. There was silence on the other end. Then Malcolm said, "You should be on that board." Celeste didn't hesitate. "I should chair it." He laughed softly, the kind of laugh people make when they're surprised but know you're right. "I'll talk to the board," he said. Celeste replied, "Talk fast." That evening, Layla slid a news update across the table. The headline read, "Orion Air proposes first-of-its-kind passenger equity board after removal controversy." Underneath was a photo not from the plane, but from one of Celeste's old keynote speeches at a medical innovation summit. She looked fierce, grounded, present. Layla smiled. "Your face is shifting the narrative." Celeste looked at the screen for a long time. "No," she said softly. "My work is," and it was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the world kept flying, but Orion Air would never be the same. Neither would Dr. Celeste Harmon. The clip of her removal had now been viewed over 12 million times. Articles flooded in Black woman removed from VIP seat sparks, aviation overhaul. The doctor who made $1 billion airline listen, seat 1A, and the power of quiet resistance. But Celeste didn't want fame. She wanted reform. And now it was happening. Orion Air announced its Passenger Equity Board. Chaired by Celeste, they released a zero-tolerance discrimination clause, retrained over 9,000 staff, and created a whistleblower hotline for in-flight misconduct. Their first audit transparent, public, brutal. Celeste reviewed it personally, and she didn't sugarcoat a thing. Meanwhile, the employees involved in Flight 408's incident were each held accountable. Lewis, the gate agent, was terminated. Greta, the lead flight attendant, resigned before being removed. Cassie, who had expressed remorse, was reassigned after intensive retraining. Bianca and Joel, from the lounge, were fired for falsifying documentation, and Sloan Winslow exposed, not a friend of the CFO, not affiliated with Orion at all. Just wealthy, entitled, and now disinvited from every philanthropic board she once flaunted. Her face had been plastered across social media, but not as a victim, as a cautionary tale. One tweet read, "Sloan got her way for 10 minutes. Celeste changed an airline forever." And Celeste. She kept moving forward, not with vengeance, with vision. At the next Women in STEM Leadership Summit, she took the stage not as a guest, but as the keynote. She didn't open with the plain story. She opened with a question. What do you do when the seat you paid for the one you worked for is taken from you? Do you fight? Do you walk away? Or do you make sure no one else ever has to ask that question again? The applause was thunderous. But the moment that mattered most came after. A young girl, maybe 12, wide-eyed and nervous, walked up to Celeste holding a program. She whispered, "I want to be a doctor like you." Celeste knelt down, smiling. "You'll be better than me," she said, then handed her a signed lanyard from the event. "Keep this, and remember you belong anywhere you sit." In the quiet of her apartment, weeks later, Celeste opened her email. A message from Malcolm Fry waited at the top. "We're naming our new internal scholarship after you, the Harmon Initiative for Inclusive Aviation. Thank you for teaching us that dignity has altitude." She smiled softly, leaned back in her chair, and looked out over the Seattle skyline. The clouds drifted. The sky was clear. The storm had passed. But the change, it was permanent. Because the seat was never just about leather and legroom. It was about worth, about visibility, about who gets to stay seated and who gets told to leave. And now that seat had a story, one of power, of grace, of a woman who stood up by refusing to get up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cause a scene. She simply asked for the dignity she deserved, and when it was denied, she didn't disappear. She rose. Dr. Celeste Harmon's quiet resistance, her refusal to be erased, became more than a personal stand. It became a movement. Her one decision to fight back reshaped airline policy, inspired new reforms, and reminded millions that silence is not strength, truth is. But let's not forget what sparked it all: a moment of racial bias disguised as routine protocol, a smile masking dismissal, a system so used to comfort for some and compliance from others. Celeste didn't just demand her seat back, she demanded a better world. So, if you've ever been overlooked, displaced, or made to feel small, know this: you are not alone. And stories like these remind us that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply refuses to move. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We'll keep bringing you stories that shine light on truth, dignity, and the power of standing your ground. Until next time, stay bold, stay kind, and never give up your seat when it belongs to you.